Welcome to implementation training for the Transition Discovery's systems level intervention. In this video, we'll cover what the TDSLI is, the framework that guides it, and some of the tools, processes, strategies, and actions that'll be used in order to implement this intervention. Let's begin by discussing what the TDSLI is. The TDSLI is a research-based approach where youth with disabilities, family members, and transition stakeholders all collaborate together and deeply on improving transition practices, programs, and services in your community at a systems level. So when implementing the TDSLI, systems level means collaboration between youth, families, and stakeholders who are all across schools, so high school and or middle school if applicable, agencies such as vocational rehab, Office of Developmental Programs, Health and Human Services, Centers for Independent Living, etc., and community partners, so businesses, providers, parent training information centers, the list goes on. And the purpose of this systems level collaboration is to improve programming and opportunities for all young people with disabilities in the community and across the system and district. So let's talk about the goals of the TD systems level intervention. So using a comprehensive resource package developed by the Transition Discoveries Initiative, LEAs will engage youth with disabilities, family members, and transition stakeholders in the design and the implementation of a data-driven plan. And this plan is going to be focused on improving, expanding, and innovating current transition practices, programs, and services at a systems level across schools, agencies, and community partners, and in collaboration between all of them. So there are really three sequential goals here of this process. The two are related. So you have to identify effective practices, programs, and services across the system to figure out what works. And at the same time, identifying potential priorities for improvement and organizational factors that might contribute to those priorities across the system. So once again, at a systems level. Once this information has been gathered, you collaborate with young people, families, and stakeholders across your transition system to develop and implement a systems level plan that draws upon the strengths identified in order to address the priorities identified and their contributing factors. And these plans are going to leverage a comprehensive resource package that has been developed by the Transition Discoveries Initiative. So in the TD systems level intervention, high quality transition practices, programs, and services are all defined by what is called the Transition Discoveries Quality Indicator Framework. So this framework has 9 areas of effective practices, programs, and services, and we call these 9 areas quality indicators. So you can see those on the screen here. And within those 9 areas, there are a total of 54 practices, programs, and services. We call these sub-indicators. And we're using the word indicator because when we see these practices and these overarching domains, these 9 domains, happening, we know that young people are really being supported. It's indicating to us that they're being supported and being exposed and provided the opportunity they need to succeed. When implementing the TD systems level intervention, your team will identify strengths and potential priorities for improvement through a systems-wide community-driven action plan. And this plan is going to be aligned to one or more of these 9 areas of the Transition Discoveries framework, and therefore one or more of the 54 practices, programs, and services within these 9 areas. And the data collected during the implementation of the TDSLI will inform your team of which of these areas of practice and the sub-practices and programs and services within them are strengths and which are areas for growth. And these will all be focused on during action planning, and then you'll implement a plan to leverage what works in order to improve what could be even better. So to get a little bit more familiar with the framework, or to get a refresher if you've already reviewed and experienced it before, we're going to do a short activity. So take some time in the Padlet below this video to, as a team, share what effective practices, programs, or services related to these domains of the framework are happening right now in your district and your transition system. So share in the Padlet below this video as a team. And within that Padlet, there's also a link to learn more about the domains of the framework, the quality indicators, and sub-indicators within those domains. And be sure to put the name of your LEA in your post inside of the Padlet. Okay, so pause this video, take some time to talk as a team, share about your effective practices, and when you've completed that activity inside of the Padlet, resume the video, and we'll keep talking about the TD-SLI. So now that we've talked about the framework and you've dived a little bit deeper into the framework to get a better understanding of how you'll be framing all of your actions during implementation, let's change gears a bit and talk about the 4 stages of the implementation process. So, stage 1 involves collecting data from young people with disabilities, ages 14 to 25, family members of young people with disabilities within that same age bracket, and transition stakeholders working in schools, working in agencies, and community partners. And the data that you'll be collecting is all about what transition practices, programs, and services across this whole system are effective, and which are those that are potential priorities for improvement. In order to collect this data, you'll use a unique tool created by the Transition Discoveries Initiative and the communities that are part of the initiative. This tool is called the Transition Discoveries Quality Indicator Survey. And this survey is distributed to young people with disabilities, family members, and transition stakeholders who will all share about their experiences, knowledge, and expertise related to what's working right now in transition in your community, in your district, in your system, and what could be improved. You'll learn a lot more about this tool and this process in follow-up videos within Module 1. So Stage 2 is all about identifying systems level strengths and priorities for improvement based upon that data. Remember, that data is collected from the Transition Discoveries Quality Indicator Survey. Teams will use a new tool known as the What Works Data Hub, and this data dashboard and data hub were developed by the Transition Discoveries Initiative so that your team would have easy and direct access to data insights about these strengths and priorities. So you'll learn a lot more about the What Works Data Hub in upcoming videos and activities within the training series. But the most important thing to know is that all of the data analysis is done for your team, priorities are identified, and this dashboard really supports your team in having a discussion about potential priorities in a way that leads towards decision making. So like I said, you'll learn a lot more about this tool and that process of data review later on in the implementation process. So Stage 3, once you have collected data and identified priorities, it's now time to form a transition change agent team and to hold a community action planning event. The Transition Change Agent team is a group of young people with disabilities, family members, and transition stakeholders. They may have completed the survey, they may have not, but they're coming from your community and they're really interested in taking on a leadership role in making and implementing a plan to address the priority areas as identified during Stage 2. The Transition Change Agent team is going to lead a community action planning event where young people with disabilities, family members, and stakeholders beyond the TCAT come to the event and all work together through a process of developing an action plan. You're going to learn about this really unique process that the Transition Discoveries Initiative has developed to hold that community action planning event with young people, families, and stakeholders during stage 3, so later on in the implementation process. But we will talk in a little bit greater detail about that process during this video today. The most important thing to know is that by the end of that event, you'll have a complete and comprehensive plan that represents all of the knowledge, voices, and experiences of your youth, families, and stakeholders across your community and your transition system. So moving on to the last stage, stage 4, it's all about implementing that plan. It's the LEA's TD implementation team and the Transition Change Agent team, known as the TCAT, working together with other young people, families, and stakeholders across the community to implement that plan they developed together at the Community Action Planning event. And to support all teams in implementing their action plans, there will be courses and toolkits and resources, as well as mentorship, direct guidance, and support from both Patent and the Transition Discoveries Initiative. A little bit more about your implementation team and the TCAT, as well as some of the supports that you'll have throughout the implementation process. So your LEA's internal TD implementation team, your core team, is going to start off with your team champion, a transition stakeholder, a stakeholder with transition knowledge, a district administrator or special education coordinator, and an agency or community partner in transition. So let's talk about those roles first. The team champion is going to spearhead the entire implementation process. They'll be the one that is primarily responsible for interacting with the training content, and if the team is not completing training materials together, they'll be relaying that information to the rest of the team and explaining to them the processes of the implementation model. Essentially, they are the team's person who is an absolute expert on what it takes to implement the TDSLI. So they'll be the one to go to answer any questions about implementation internally for the team. They'll also be coordinating with their patent coaches and their local coaches and the Transition Discoveries Initiative to make sure that deadlines are being met, deliverables are being provided and achieved, and that progress is being made to support their community. The last major role of the team champion is to complete what is called the monthly implementation update. And this is an online tool where teams will get together and really think strategically about different aspects of the implementation process. So there are prompts and guidance on there. It's like having a coach with you at your meeting related to implementation of the TDSLI. And the team champion will learn far more about this MIU, the monthly implementation update, in the second video of this module. In addition to the team champion, you also have your stakeholder with transition knowledge. This is someone who's working in the schools or district who really has a pulse on what transition looks like in the district. They might be a special education teacher or a transition coordinator. It really depends on the makeup of that community and that system. But there's someone who really has a good understanding of what transition looks like. They have transition knowledge. They're working with transition age young people and families and supporting and providing transition services. You'll also have your district administrator. They're really critical for your team and required because they'll be the one to potentially support getting access to change and make decisions, but also collect data throughout this entire implementation process. So they'll be your gateway and your support for being able to implement all of the different activities within the implementation process in cases where an administrator might have to use their authority in order to give access to complete those activities for the team. Optional but highly recommended is your agency or community partner. So someone working with an agency, Voc Rehab, Office of Developmental Programs, Center for Independent Living. As we had mentioned before, there's many other potential partners as well, or community partner, employers, providers, other nonprofits, parent training and information centers. Any community or agency partner that's working currently with your transition system in your high schools, in your schools and middle schools, to support young people in reaching their goals for life after high school. So these are your core team members. And then during stages 3 and 4, you'll also integrate the TCAT into your team. So this is your additional young people, families, and stakeholders who are going to be spearheading the community action planning event and co-leading with your TD implementation team the implementation of the action plan developed during that event.